Alice, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's a pleasure to have you. This is a podcast on behalf of Gladstones Clinic, and its purpose is to speak to people that have kind of been through treatment and they're kind of living a life of recovery, just to understand, what treatment was like, kind of what worked for them, what kind of aspects of it that they utilize as they kind of transition. I know that you were an ex-client of Gladstones.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted to kind of get you on and just talk a little bit about what led to treatment, what your experience of treatment was, and kind of what's happened since, if you're comfortable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so what led up to me going into treatment was essentially, it was my brother that kind of got me into treatment. My brother's an addict who's got over 10 years clean time now. So he noticed, sort of the sort of red flags that I was going downhill. I'd been in a place of wanting to ask for help, but not really having the confidence or the knowing how to ask for help. So I was quite blessed that it was my brother sort of stepped forward and pulled me out of the place where I'd been sort of squatting and said, you're in trouble. Do you want to go to rehab? And it was just such a big weight lifted off my shoulders because I was desperate. For me, it was rehab, jail or death. That's where it was headed. I lost my house because I wasn't paying bills. So I was sort of staying at boyfriends at the time. We were using together. So it was a really unhealthy relationship, which quite often meant I'd spend nights in my car to get away from him, or that was traumatic enough. To fund my habit, I was doing a lot of criminal activities, sort of driving for drug dealers and things like that. So I knew at some point, my run of luck was going to run out. And the sort of people I was hanging about with, it wasn't just going to be, having my driving licence taken off me. I was going to be stabbed or locked up, because this wasn't just small amounts of drugs that I was messing it with, it was big amounts. So it was my brother who just said, if you really want it, it's there for you. And he had a chat with mum and dad. I couldn't talk to my parents at the time. I was just too ashamed. It was, they'd already gone through it with one child. My brother's older than me, and I felt like I'd failed them massively. I've got a daughter as well, so my daughter had been sort of living on and off with them, and admitting that I'd chosen this path over my daughter and over everything was really shaming, really embarrassed. I was embarrassed, massively embarrassed, but extremely lucky that rehab was an option for me.
Yeah.
So I followed what was suggested. My brother had been in rehab twice, so he kind of knew what's what. And I was told that I was going to need a 6-week stint in primary because, that was a good amount of time, which I did. And then going on from that, it was made very clear to me that secondary was going to be an option. I was not welcome back home. It was too stressful for my parents to go back home. And, I didn't have a house anyway. They wouldn't have seen me on the streets, but for their own health and well-being, my parents, they're reasonably old now. My mum's in her... she's got to be late 70s, I think she is now. She might even be older than that. And it was really affecting her health. And my brother said, it's killing mum, essentially, the stress of it. So you're going to do it and you're going to do it properly. And I was at that point of, if someone had said jump off a cliff, I'd have done that. I was so desperate. So I just held my hands up and went, I'll just do whatever it takes to get me out of this situation. Because in my head, it was either that or, I'd got to that point in my addiction where I was really seriously considering committing suicide. Planning it, obsessing about it. But something inside of me, I've always had this kind of deep-seated fight inside of me that was like, that's not going to be the path for me. Couldn't do that to my daughter. And I just wasn't willing to give up. But that kind of stubbornness I had kept me in my addiction for quite a long time. I headed to Gladstones to use their secondary care. Initially, it was meant to be a month. But after that month, I realised I'd only really scratched the surface of some of sort of the really deep-rooted traumas that I'd experienced sort of throughout my life. All in all, I ended up staying 3 months with Gladstones in the secondary care.
And just like coming back to like the initial jolt, in terms of the realisation that maybe going into treatment is a possibility, the conversation with your brother, that kind of interaction. When you talk about that kind of level of despair and desperation and the shame and the guilt, I know exactly what you mean. I've been there. In my situation, even the thought that could be a possibility kind of wasn't there. And it was a very similar situation that you described with me, is that it kind of took a family member. And like, do you think at that point, would it have been something that you would have considered if you hadn't have had that kind of intervention?
I just don't think, I couldn't see myself ever making that call myself. Yeah. And I think because of my brother being an addict, there was a level of sort of language that he used with me. He got it, he understood.
It got through to you.
It got through to me. And I think he caught me at the right time. He caught me, early in the morning, sober-ish, where I was in that desperation. So I think it was good timing, and he knew what to say. It wasn't a forced, you have to do this or else. It was a, look, this is there for you if you want it, but this is where it's going if you don't want it.
Yeah.
I think he was quite surprised that I took that offer, actually. But, me and my brother have never had the best of relationships, but it was amazing that my brother could sort of, reach me. Because my parents couldn't. My parents had tried, and I was manipulating them. I was lying to them. I was angry. I was resentful. There's no way they could have reached me. Whereas my brother, having known that he had an understanding, was a real help.
Well, and the ability to get through to you.
Yeah.
And I what you said about the right moment, I totally understand. Because you do reach a place where you're just exhausted. Just exhausted.
Yeah, it's tiring.
But in the morning, because it's like the mornings are particularly awful.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of you're kind of coming to terms with the fact that you've done it again. Almost, it's like it's kind of it hasn't stopped. It's kind of, and it just gets progressively worse and worse and worse.
Yeah.
And so I remember the mornings can be so bad because you do have that moment.
Yeah.
That choice almost in a sense. Yeah. The fact that someone could give you an opportunity or suggest.
It was suggested.
A suggestion.
If it had been put on me, I'd have probably fell backed into a corner.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And did you know anything about what rehab was or what it entailed? Or
I mean, I was around, when my brother went to rehab, but that was quite a while ago, and I'd been and visited him, years ago in rehab. So I kind of had a rough idea. I knew about sort of 12-step programs and fellowship and things like that. I didn't really know what it entailed exactly. Yeah. I just sort of thought what I knew was what you see, on TV and things like that. It's kind of, you kind of think it's going to be horrific. You think you're going to be locked in.
Bread and water.
Yeah, bread and water, and you're going to be forced to do this and forced to do that, and no one's going to understand. But that wasn't the case at all. So
just kind of like, arriving at Gladstones, like how was that? Like what's the kind of, is there anybody that's listening that doesn't really know what's involved? How does it work? What happens?
It was slightly different for me because I'd done 6 weeks in primary at a different facility. So I'd already had 6 weeks clean time. The idea of the secondary was giving me a safe environment to do some more recovery, but having a bit more freedom, not just throwing me back out into the world. So when I got there, I was incredibly nervous because it was, a whole new sort of setup that I didn't know. And I did a week in the clinic to get to know everybody to begin with before I moved over to the flats. And what I can remember walking in the door is just, it wasn't like the facility I was in before, it's a big open place, doors are open, you can leave. The other place I'd been in, all the doors were locked all the time. You could get out if you wanted to, but you'd have to press buzzers and stuff. So it just felt like there was a more relaxed sense of trust there, which was really nice. And the staff, as soon as I turned up, the staff knew exactly who I was and, just really friendly, which helped. And I remember there was one particular client as well who sort of helped me get my bags out of my car and was really friendly. And I just straight away sort of thought, okay, this is another safe environment, For me, being safe is really key. Having been in addiction in these really unsafe environments with men or living in my car, having somewhere I felt safe is really important.
The kind of transition, because you mentioned secondary, so there's like an initial primary period, which is usually like a detox period.
No. So, I mean, because I'd done the 6 weeks in a 12-step rehab, and I went home with my mum and dad to see my daughter for 2 nights, and then I still have my driving licence, so I drove myself to Gladstones, and obviously had to go through all the sort of drugs tests to make sure I still was clean.
Yeah.
And then initially I did a week in the clinic just to get to know the therapist, then to get to know me, just building up a bit of trust, figuring out what kind of program I was going to do. Because that's what initially actually drew me to Gladstones, their secondary, was that it was sold to me it was going to be a bespoke program. They had all these sort of different sessions that you can do. But again, it was like, because I'd already done 6 weeks of treatment, there were some that I didn't need, and I needed others more. And to mix that in with being able to have a bit of time to sort of get back into the world, go for walks, go get some groceries, but have that safe environment to go back to. That's what was sold to me, and that was exactly what it was.
Yeah, it's an interesting part of it, because I think I've done it before in my past, but to kind of do the initial, say, 2 to 4 weeks, and then to kind of go back home, and it doesn't take very long to kind of end up back where I was, or back where a person was. You haven't really left the environment. You've gone back to the environment which you originally left. It's the same people, it's the same stuff that's going on. Not a lot's changed. Very easy to fall back in exactly the same types of behaviours, and it can happen very quickly because 4 weeks of rehab, when you come out, you feel pretty good. You do. You're in a good place. So, but then I think with rehab, the secondary and then tertiary, it's kind of like you mentioned earlier. I often assimilate it to like a tricycle, taking stabilizers off a tricycle. Yeah. You're slowly reintegrating back into kind of normal everyday life, but at a kind of supervised, gradual pace.
Yeah. There were consequences. I could have drunk and used at any point really if I'd really wanted to, but there were consequences that I would have not been able to go back home. I'd have been homeless. There was that level of trust that was given to me. So that sort of rebel in me that's like, I won't be controlled, was given a little bit of freedom, but I knew that I was going to be pulled up and that I wouldn't have been able to get away with trying to pull the wool over people's eyes. And I honestly didn't want to be honest with you. I was just so desperate to get some good recovery that I just did what was suggested. And that meant not going back home. I couldn't go back home. As much as I wanted to, because my daughter was there, I wanted to be living with my daughter again. I knew I needed to get a solid recovery so I could be a mother. So if I haven't got that, then I haven't got recovery. And part of that is that prolonged period, in secondary.
And it leads forward.
It leads forward, yeah.
It's like kind of, what do they call it? Like that springboard.
Yeah.
Just that little bit of extra time. In terms of the programme, or in terms of what you kind of actually experience, could you talk a little bit about what aspects of the programme kind of impacted you the most, or what you found kind of genuinely useful to kind of maintain a period of sobriety?
I think what was important for me was that I turned up every morning for process group. I think process was really important to sort of talk through how I was feeling, because, when you've drunk and taken drugs, you don't know how you're feeling. You get this feeling, but you don't know how to name it. So being taken through that process of kind of going, I sort of feel a bit like this, and people help you find out where that's from, was really good. Start off the day sort of going, today I feel okay, or today I feel like this. What do I need to do to make sure that I'm not going to crave or want to use drink and drugs to stop these feelings? So it's exactly what it is. You're processing what's going on in your head and saying it out loud. And again, not keeping things a secret, because, in addiction, everything's secret. And doing that in a group setting is really good as well, because not only am I learning about myself, but I can see myself in other people. It's mirrored behaviour. So someone might be feeling the same thing as me, and you can kind of see it in them, and you help each other figure out what's going on in your head. So yeah, I made sure I did process every morning. And then, to be honest with you, it was nearly all of the groups I enjoyed, all the sessions. I'd sort of sometimes take the afternoons off to go for a walk and then come back again. But hearing the sessions where people do their life stories, they're not 15 and they're 15 plus. I like to make sure I was there for that, so I could get to know the people that were in rehab. Because again, part of it being a group is that you're there to support each other as well as yourself, because we all have the same behaviours, really, just perhaps different stories around it. So it was really humbling to hear some people's stories, and it just really highlighted for me, where addiction can take you. And it just made me grateful, really grateful that I was in a position that I was in. And I really liked the equine therapy as well, because, I was a horse rider for 25 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So as soon as it said horses, I was like, I'm there.
Okay.
And the women that run that are fantastic. They have such a good understanding of, of how I couldn't believe it at one point. I think I just had a really bad day and I just felt just miserable. And I was just quite quiet and I wasn't very comfortable with one of the other members in the group. And she just pulled me to one side and she just said, what's going on? What, you just seem a bit off.
Just saw it.
And she just saw it. And this is a lady, I don't know what she knows about addiction. She works with horses, but just having that understanding, I was like, she's good with horses, but it was my behaviour mirrored by the horses. And, I couldn't get away with it. And she just knew that I needed a bit of time by myself with one of these horses. And it just changed my entire day. It was, fantastic. They're such beautiful animals. Yeah.
And I, enjoy the point that you make about like the group dynamic and the kind of identification and the mirroring. Because sometimes with rehab, because it's residential, like you pack a bag and you move into a place for a period of time and you don't know anyone that's there and you're kind of forced to interact with each other on some therapeutic or kind of, during your downtime. But it can be like a little microcosm.
Yeah.
And sometimes that is the kind of best therapy, is that kind of peer-to-peer social interaction. I found anyway. Because when I'm not out with groups of friends, at nightclubs. I'm in a room on my own, kind of, it's always been that way. And so over a prolonged period of time, socially, it's really difficult sometimes to kind of even have an idea of how I'm feeling or how to even describe, to find the words to describe it, just so void of kind of self-understanding and self-recognition. But then having that group of people, having that dynamic in that place in such a kind of intimate setting, it's interesting where it gets pulled out from.
Yeah.
Whatever the kind of blocks are. I remember sometimes the best kind of breakthroughs I had was just smoking a cigarette with another peer outside at like 8 in the morning or whatever.
Yeah, a lot of therapy gets done in the smoking area, yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
With like the coffee in the morning, you kind of get to know each other. And you feel comfortable and you can kind of really start to bring your guard down.
I think what's amazing is that it doesn't matter, what's happened in your life, what drugs you took, whether one person did more than you, less than you. We all have this same hole inside of us. And for me, my self-worth was rock bottom, my self-confidence, my self-love didn't exist. And being around people who didn't judge me was massive. And I could learn to just be myself, because other people were exactly the same. None of us, I didn't know who I was, because, drugs and drink had just been my entire life. It was a fake version of myself. And for people to be able to go, well, you're actually quite funny, or, you're a really caring person, or for me to kind of be like, well, I kind of thought that, but, to hear somebody else say it over and over again, it's like, I've got to start listening to this and, get me out of that self-pity, because I trusted these people because they were the same as me. Like you said, the identification, that was massive.
Start building up like this kind of image of yourself.
Yeah. And you've got to be, these people, why are these people going to lie to me? Why, I've got to trust that what they're saying comes from the heart. And you see that it is. I feel really blessed as an addict that we have this really sensitive people. That's what I've tend to find. I'm really sensitive. So connecting with somebody emotionally is massive. And to be vulnerable and to be trusting and get genuine feedback. Sometimes it can be quite kind of to the point. It's constructive though, constructive criticism. That it's only coming from a place of we all just want to get better, we want to get well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It's a lovely way to put it. And laughter. Yeah. I remember laughter was something that was so foreign to me. I remember laughing, like really probably laughing for the first time in a long time. Yeah. And that was just amazing. I
can remember the first time I properly started laughing. I can't remember what it was at. And that feeling, I was like, what is this feeling? And then I instantly started crying because I was like, I really realised that I hadn't felt that laughter and that happiness for so long. And I was in this bizarre situation of like laughing and crying at the same time, because I was crying because I was happy, but also a bit sad that I'd been so miserable. But to have those feelings again was amazing.
Yeah, that kind of moment recognition.
And again, to share it with other people as well, having been so alone and isolated. So share those moments is lush, yeah.
And do you remember, or like, was there anything about yourself Because I know that in rehab you kind of wake up a bit, you know, particularly when the detox is over. You kind of get the colour back in your eyes, and your brain kind of kicks on. You start having thoughts again, and it's all a bit. Was there any aspect of that that surprised you about yourself that you recognised about yourself? Kind of going through that kind of waking up.
I think I was surprised at this sort of side of me that, I don't know how to describe it. I think I was surprised at how much I'd hidden from myself. These sides of me that I thought were a bit weird, a bit quirky, you know, a bit stupid, a bit silly. How actually, you know, that was just normal. It's just normal. And that actually being myself, it was so alien to me. So just being myself and enjoying being me and being able to not judge myself. That was pretty amazing, yeah.
In a sense, kind of just being reintroduced to yourself.
Yeah. Well, you say reintroduced, but I didn't know myself. Yeah. So I was completely getting to know myself. You know, I used to be very good at being different people at different situations.
Like a chameleon.
Yeah, like a chameleon, exactly. There's, you know, work Alice, there's Alice at home, family Alice, there's Alice with this set of friends, etc., etc. And I always had like imposter syndrome. I didn't know who I was at all. So to be able to someone just to go, let's just find out who you are. You know, what do you like? What don't you like? Yeah, it's this bizarre experience, but it's beautiful.
Do you mind me asking how long you've been sober?
10 months.
10 months.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Alex. Wow, well done. And you transitioned from Gladstones into something called supported housing.
Yeah.
Or some people can call them dry houses or halfway houses, I think. But I know them as supported houses. And I love these facilities. I think they're fantastic. I don't think enough people know about them. They've kind of saved me, you know, on a number of occasions. Could you talk a little bit about what the decision-making process was leading up to deciding to go into a supporting house and what a kind of supported house is? To
be honest with you, I had a completely different view of what a dry house is. In my head, I just thought it was going to be just kind of a load of people, some relapsing, like dirty, I thought it was going to be hell, to be honest with you. I did not want to go to dry house. Massively out of my comfort zone. But again, I was willing to do anything, and it was suggested to me. I knew I couldn't go back home, so I thought I need to give it a go. And I thought, even if I just try it for a month, at least I know. And I was told there's no growth in comfort. I struggled to step out of my comfort zone, and I had to do something different this time. And part of that was being in a sober community, continuing getting that foundation in my recovery. And it was the best thing I ever did. And it was completely different to how, in my head, I catastrophized it completely differently to how it actually was. It's a beautiful place to be. So I think, yeah, I came to have a look. I was lucky I came to have a look. So that helped me get an idea of where I was going. This sort of feeling of being out of control that was like, just going to leave here and that's that, I really didn't like. So being able to see the place and go, okay, well, this is the room I'm going to have. These are the people I'm going to be living with. That definitely really helped. And again, just like, in my head, I was thinking, well, how long am I going to have to spend there? Is it going to be a year? I was told, just take it month by month. Just bring it back, see how you get on. And now I'm like, I love it here. I can't see myself leaving anytime soon because the community around dry houses, again, it's another thing for safety for me. I feel I'm in a safe place. It's supported. There's so much recovery around Weston. You can do absolutely anything really. There's loads of different fellowships, and even people who don't want to go fellowship, there's other ways of recovering. But again, being in a house with people who know my story, don't judge me, and know me well enough that if I'm starting to show odd behaviours, they can pull me up on it, because there will still be times where I can't see it myself, and having that trust that I'm loved and cared for and held is really important in early recovery.
You can't drink or take drugs, honestly.
No, so yeah, the idea of a dry house is it's dry. So you can't drink or take drugs. You get kicked out if you do. And the idea between us all being together is that we care for each other. So you want to catch someone's behaviour before it gets to that point, you'd like to think. But at the end of the day, if one of my housemates I suspect has been drinking, then there's a house manager I can go to and say, look, I've got this concern, and it's dealt with really appropriately so that everyone's in a safe environment. Because, you know, I could go to sort of shared housing and there'd be people, you know, your normal people, you can have a glass of wine in the evening. But in early recovery, that I'm putting myself in a position where I'm having to fight that obsession, which is not easy. I don't want to wake up every morning and think, oh God, another day of fighting, you know, being an addict. It shouldn't be like that. It should be natural and easy. And God, yeah, you have to put hard work in, absolutely. But I don't want it to be something that I have to wake up and dread fighting every morning. Being in a community where I make it easier for myself because everybody's sober, it just is. It's a much better idea. It's much safer.
And thank you. That's a really good description of what they're like. And I think it's important to consider the aspect of time, you know, particularly for someone that's kind of been to treatment and they're, you know, in reasonably early recovery, that it does take time.
Yeah.
You know, and I think sometimes it can be a misconception that, you know, I've gone to rehab, I've done 4 weeks, I've done 8 weeks, I'm better. You know, I'm fixed, it's done. But I think in actuality, particularly if it's a kind of long-term behaviour, it can take a couple of years, and often does take a couple of years. And supported houses are very effective at giving you that time. You know, where you're in a safe place, exactly how you described. You know, you're in a safe place. There are consequences. You know, if you do drink or if you do take drugs, then, you know, you're out. You know, it's because it's safeguarding. You know, you can't do that around other people that are really putting the effort in. And I think, in my opinion, that's one of the best things that it kind of affords a person. You know, trying to embark on a journey of kind of sustained sobriety is giving them the best possible chance. Where, like you said, where you're kind of not in direct kind of temptation and every day is not a struggle, you're actually kind of in a place where it's normal. You know, it's kind of, that's the norm. You know, to wake up in the morning and see someone, you know, drinking in the kitchen, that would be weird. That would be really weird for me. Yeah. Like, I wouldn't know how to process that. Yeah.
But I think what's really nice about the dry houses as well is that it's the support you get as well. You know, you can ring up the people who run the dry houses at any point and go, do you know what, today's been a really bad day. I don't know what I'm doing. And the knowledge, because we're all the same, you know, the help is just there. Much easier. Because you're surrounded by people, it's much easier to reach out for help, I think. Because I'm not isolating. I did enough isolating addiction. I don't want to do it, you know, in recovery.
And just then, thank you, and just to kind of like, you know, slowly finish up. I like to finish up on this question that I tend to ask at the end of the podcast, which is, if anyone's listening to this that are going through active addiction right now, or if there's a family member or a loved one that isn't quite sure what to do or who to contact, what advice would you give?
I think, so the person who might be watching this who's, you know, still out there in active addiction, what would have helped me was just being told that there is hope. Everybody deserves to live a life of love and freedom, and it is possible if you ask for the help. Anybody that gets into rehab, the first thing I say to them is, well done for making that step, because it's the hardest step often. It's just holding up your hands and going, please, somebody help me. There is a way out, there is light at the end of the tunnel. And it doesn't have to be a bad thing. A life of recovery, you know. I feel like I'm living again. It's the happiest I've ever been. And if someone had sort of been able to show me how I look now compared to what I was like in active addiction, said, you know, that's possible, I wouldn't have believed them. But it is. And you don't have to be stuck in the horrible, dark desperation of addiction. You really don't. The first step is just going, I need help.
And your testament to it, Alice. It's excellent advice. And thank you. Thank you so much for doing this and coming on. It's really appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks.